The first message your home sends to the world isn't in the living room. It's not in the decor. It isn't even in the warmth of your welcome. It's in the space just before the threshold, the place where the outside pauses and the inside begins. The gate, the silent guard, the unspeaking invitation. Stand there for a moment, wherever your own entrance may be, an iron gate, a wooden door, a patch of stone. Look closely, not at the size or shape, but the spirit. What lives here? Is it welcoming, hesitant, forgotten? Because in classical Feng Shui, the main gate isn't just functional, it's spiritual. It is what the ancients called the mouth of Qi, the place where energy enters, feeds, and begins its journey into the heartbeat of your home. Just like the mouth receives food to nourish the body, the gate receives opportunity to nourish your life. And yet, most people pass it without thought. A rusting hinge, a crowded pot, a plant that's yellowing and tired, an unlit bulb near the nameplate. These might seem like small things, but in the language of energy, they shout loudly. They say, "This house is not yet ready to receive." They say, "We're closed." They say, "The resident may be working hard, but they're missing one thing: alignment." You see, in Feng Shui, energy does not knock. It doesn't wait. It flows to where it is welcomed. And that welcome begins at the outer gate. If your finances have been in a drought, if your job offers seem delayed, if your relationships feel interrupted just before they blossom, don't only look inward, look forward, look outward. Your gate may be whispering something to the universe that you never intended. Something like, "Not yet," or worse, "No thanks." But here's the good news. This is not a story of superstition. It's a lesson in design. Energy follows form, and form, once understood, can be shifted, gently, wisely, intentionally. Because what stands outside your home doesn't just reflect how you live. It shapes what is allowed to arrive. Think of it like a riverbank. If it's narrow, cluttered, or overgrown, the water doesn't stop. It diverts. It finds another path. But if the bank is open, wide, curated with care, then the flow deepens, nourishes, enriches. That is what we want for you. Not just more light, not just more beauty, but more flow, that steady stream of support that shows up as luck, but is really just the outcome of space made ready. So in this video, we're not just going to talk about lucky bamboo or potted palms. We're going to explore the subtle, powerful language your front gate speaks on your behalf, whether you know it or not. I'll walk you through the plant choices that open the door to abundance and the ones that quietly block it. We'll look at why certain leaves pull Qi in like a magnet, while others scatter it like leaves in wind. And we'll talk about placement, shape, color, health. Because in Feng Shui, it's never just a plant. It's a message, a ritual, a living intention. Along the way, we'll also explore a few real-world stories, including one about a billionaire real estate mogul who, after years of success, found his luck beginning to dry up. It wasn't until a chance consultation revealed that 2 dead bushes had been placed unknowingly at the corners of his main gate that he realized the energy responds even to the things we've stopped seeing. When he cleared them and replaced them with paired citrus trees, the tide turned. Not magically, but meaningfully. Because energy doesn't need your belief, it needs your permission. So stay with me. Let's open this gate together. Let's choose plants not just for their looks, but for their energy signature. Let's build a doorway not just for guests, but for fortune, harmony, and flow. And before we step further, if this way of seeing your home resonates with you, if this gentle conversation between ancient wisdom and modern life stirs something real, I invite you to take one action now, just one small act of alignment. Help us keep this channel alive and growing by giving this video a like, sharing it with someone whose home deserves this care, and subscribing to New Day Mindfulness. We're aiming for 2,000 followers, not for numbers, but for the growing village of hearts and minds who want to live with more clarity, more flow, and more quiet power. Because your gate is more than a structure. It's a signal. And your future? It's already listening. The silent architect of fortune, your gate in the flow of energy, in the quiet architecture of life, where form shapes fate and space whispers louder than sound, the front gate stands not just as a threshold between inside and out, but as the silent architect of your fortune. According to classical Feng Shui, no other physical point in the structure of a home holds more authority over your life's energetic direction than this single space. It is the mouth of Qi, the first and most vital portal through which opportunity, stability, prosperity, and harmony enter or fail to. Everything that occurs in your life, every advancement, delay, stroke of luck, or period of stagnation, can be traced to the quality of energy you allow through your main entrance. Not metaphorically, but quite literally. Energy in the language of Feng Shui is not a poetic abstraction. It is a tangible, measurable current. Sheng Qi, the benevolent force that feeds vitality. Unlike stagnant or destructive energy, Sha Qi, Sheng Qi is warm, uplifting, and nourishing. But like water, it is not loyal to hope. It is loyal to design. It flows toward homes that welcome it, that court it, that respect the delicate balance between form and frequency. It avoids homes where confusion reigns, where decay sits unnoticed, or where movement is trapped behind clutter or misalignment. The gate, then, is the opening statement, the cover of the book, the first breath before the speech. If you place your intention at the gate, everything else within the home begins to harmonize in reflection. If you ignore it, the internal efforts, no matter how sincere, struggle to hold. And in this subtle terrain, the role of plants cannot be overstated. Because plants are not simply aesthetic features in Feng Shui, they are energy translators. They interpret the invisible into the visible. They shape, buffer, invite, and direct Qi, but only if they are chosen and placed with knowledge, not trend. When we speak of plants at the gate, we are not speaking of potted decoration. We are speaking of sentinels, green guardians whose posture, shape, and elemental frequency can determine whether wealth feels welcomed or turned away. A single thriving plant in the right position can act like a magnetic host, pulling in warmth, business, harmony. Meanwhile, the wrong plant, dead, sharp, misplaced, can disrupt the flow entirely, repelling support, dulling momentum, even disturbing interpersonal relationships inside the home. And because the entrance is not just architectural, but symbolic, every plant placed there becomes a silent messenger. There are 5 types of plants widely regarded in Feng Shui as particularly suited to the entrance gate, each with distinct energy signatures. The first is the money tree, or Pachira aquatica. With its thick braided trunk and full green canopy, it symbolizes steady financial growth and grounded accumulation. Its leaves resemble an open palm, an emblem of receiving. Placed in pairs on either side of a gate, the money tree becomes an anchor of prosperity. But placement matters. The soil must be healthy, the pot stable, and the foliage well pruned. Dried edges or leaning stems signal neglected wealth, not abundance. More importantly, the tree should be placed slightly forward, not directly flush with the door, to create a gentle buffering field that eases Sheng Qi into the home rather than pushing it. Second is the citrus plant, particularly kumquat or lime trees, often used in traditional southern Chinese homes. Unlike the sprawling money tree, citrus plants are more compact, but they carry dense symbolic weight. Their golden or orange fruit, resembling ancient coins, signify not only wealth but ripeness, meaning readiness. A citrus tree tells energy, this home is prepared to harvest. But again, its tension matters. A citrus plant placed with care near the left side of the gate, from inside looking out, activates yangwood energy, enhancing expansion and opportunity. In contrast, neglected citrus, pale leaves, unripe or rotting fruit, sends a confused signal, suggesting incomplete effort or blocked outcomes. The lesson is clear. The plant's health reflects your energetic readiness to receive. The third plant is the jade plant, or Crassula ovata, often referred to as the friendship tree or lucky plant. Unlike the vertical growth of the money tree or citrus, the jade plant grows in rounded, clustered forms, mimicking coins and gathering bowls. This form is crucial. It suggests accumulation, holding, storing. Jade plants are ideal for entrances facing the southeast, the direction traditionally associated with wealth. Their thick, succulent leaves store water, symbolizing retained abundance rather than fleeting gain. But jade plants are subtle. They do not like excessive movement or noise. Placed too close to a door that slams or near harsh lighting, they begin to shrink. Instead, they flourish in places of quiet respect, where their slow rhythm can support long-term gain. Fourth is the bamboo palm, not to be confused with lucky bamboo in water. The bamboo palm is a tall, slender-leafed plant that creates a screen of elegant motion. In Feng Shui, movement is not just allowed, it is vital. Stagnant entrances breed stagnant results. The bamboo palm's soft, swaying leaves attract sheng qi and keep it circulating gently near the doorway, preventing it from rushing past. These are ideal for entrances that face fast-moving roads or sharp architectural angles. Their vertical growth suggests upliftment and resilience, but because of their height, they must be balanced. A single tall bamboo on one side creates visual and energetic imbalance. Use them in pairs, and always ensure they do not block the door's full swing. A door that cannot open wide is a mouth that stutters. Finally, there is the snake plant, Sansevieria. Often misunderstood in Feng Shui, snake plants are bold, protective, and sharp. In most indoor spaces, they are best avoided near rest areas due to their upward spear-like growth. But outside, particularly flanking the gate at a distance, they act as energetic guardians. Think of them as green sentries. Their sword-like leaves cut through stagnant qi and form a barrier against invasive energy. Homes on busy streets or with chaotic external energy benefit from two snake plants placed in tall earthen pots at either side of the entrance wall, not right next to the door, but slightly offset to shield and redirect. The key is proportion. Overuse of sharp plants makes a space feel militarized. Use them where needed, but always in concert with softer, inviting greenery. Each of these 5 plant types carries a story, a message, and a frequency, but the real story lies in how you engage with them. Prosperity is not only invited, it is maintained. Watering a plant is not just horticulture, it is energetic conversation. Pruning it is not just maintenance, it is refinement of intention. And placement is not design, it is declaration. Are your plants facing inward or outward? Are they leaning, thirsty, forgotten? Or are they clean, upright, and well-rooted? These questions are not about gardening, they are about magnetism. The most powerful thing you can do for your financial flow today may not be a business decision. It may be moving a plant 6 inches to the left. It may be wiping dust off a leaf. It may be switching a tired fern for a strong citrus. Because the gate does not judge your bank account. It reflects your energy preparation. And in Feng Shui, form precedes fortune. So next time you return home, pause before entering. Don't just unlock the door, look around. What stands to the left and right of your gate? Is there balance? Is there invitation? Is there care? Because in energy language, these are not questions of style. They are questions of destiny. A thriving money tree may not make you wealthy overnight, but it tells the universe, this home is ready. And sometimes that readiness is the only missing piece. Wealth plant number 1, ornamental bamboo, the breath of endurance. In classical Feng Shui, bamboo is not merely a plant. It is a living metaphor for life's capacity to grow upward even through difficulty. When positioned thoughtfully at the front gate, ornamental bamboo becomes a breath of endurance, inviting an energy that is calm yet strong, yielding yet ambitious. Its tall, straight canes echo the energy of progress, discipline, and spiritual maturity. There is an unspoken elegance in bamboo's design, one that reflects nature's silent push toward light. Unlike thorny bushes or heavy-branched trees that stagnate movement, bamboo amplifies what Feng Shui calls sheng qi, vital, nourishing energy that moves gracefully through a space and into one's life. From a symbolic perspective, the vertical growth of bamboo mimics an ascension through life's obstacles. Each segment resembles a chapter of steady growth, with clear boundaries between effort and reward. For someone navigating a competitive professional field or trying to rise after financial setbacks, this upward rhythm is essential. Feng Shui practitioners have long considered bamboo a career enhancer, not just because of its fast growth, but because of the energy field it cultivates: steady, focused, and untangled. From a directional alignment perspective, bamboo resonates most harmoniously with the east sector of a home's entrance. In five-element theory, the east corresponds to the wood element, which governs health, new beginnings, and family cohesion. When you align the plant's essence with this sector, the impact becomes more than decorative. It becomes architectural, energetically speaking. A bamboo cluster near the east-facing gate does not merely beautify the entrance. It acts as a guardrail for chai, directing it inward and upward rather than letting it dissipate. And yet, not all bamboo is created equal. One must be discerning in the type of bamboo chosen. Lucky bamboo, although not a true bamboo but a species of Directional, is popular for its aesthetic and symbolic connotations. When arranged in groupings of 3, 6, or 9 stalks, it carries specific vibrational qualities: 3 for happiness, 6 for luck, and 9 for long-term prosperity. True bamboo, like bambusa or clumping varieties, is more rooted in outdoor Feng Shui applications. These should be favored over running bamboo, which tends to be invasive and chaotic in energy. An uncontrolled bamboo patch may unintentionally send a message of uncontained stress or financial leakage. There's also a subtle lesson in observing how bamboo bends in the wind, yet does not break. For homes situated on a curve or near a sharp road bend, locations that often bear intense chai, the gentle sway of bamboo can soften these aggressive flows. Its ability to buffer without resisting becomes a shield that does not obstruct, but rather reorients the incoming energy into a more harmonious frequency. Consider a quiet anecdote from a small town in rural Massachusetts. A middle-aged school teacher named Elaine had a narrow gate at the end of a sloped driveway, often criticized by her peers as inauspicious. Taking the advice of a Feng Shui consultant, she placed 2 symmetrical pots of lucky bamboo flanking the path. Nothing extravagant, just balanced, upright arrangements. Within 6 months, her teaching career shifted unexpectedly. She received an award for excellence in education, was promoted to department head, and even found the clarity to start a weekend tutoring circle from her home. She didn't chase change, it arrived quietly through a gate now aligned with her resilience. It's important to note that bamboo thrives on intention. Keep it upright, unbroken, and well-trimmed. Avoid letting it lean or become dry, as this reflects neglect and stagnation. Water it regularly but gently, and if placing it in pots, choose earthen tones or deep green ceramics that complement the wood element. Placing smooth stones or a red ribbon at the base can further enhance stability and yang energy. A gate framed by bamboo does more than look peaceful. It becomes a passage where each step forward is supported and each moment of doubt is softened. In the language of space, bamboo whispers, "You may bend, but you will not break." And when that message greets fortune at your front door, prosperity listens. Wealth plant number 2, Areca palm, the clean sweep for career and clarity. Among the many botanical symbols favored in classical Feng Shui, the Areca palm stands out as both visually graceful and energetically powerful. Its long, feather-like fronds ripple in space like wind chimes made of leaves, each strand gently sweeping the air of invisible residue. Symbolically, it functions not just as a plant, but as a natural cleansing tool, brushing away the subtle static of old worries, lingering doubt, and mental fog that gathers in the entrance of a home. The energy that flows into your gate often carries the residue of your street, your visitors, and your past decisions. The Areca palm, when placed with awareness, acts like a silent filter, one that doesn't scream for attention but quietly rearranges the energetic particles around it. Feng Shui masters have long appreciated the Areca palm for its association with mental clarity and lightness of spirit. Its thin, upright stalks speak of upward motion, of ambition tempered with grace. Unlike thicker, denser foliage that may absorb too much yin energy, the Areca allows light to dance through its leaves. This interaction between light and space matters because it speaks to the heart of yang activation, the kind of energy that propels action, purpose, and bold thinking. When your front gate faces the south or southeast, the directions ruled by the fire and wood elements, respectively, the Areca palm becomes more than a choice of decor. it becomes an amplifier. South-facing gates influence reputation and public image. Southeast governs wealth flow and the continuity of income. The Areca, being both wood and element and fire and temperament, supports and strengthens these zones. Its presence aligns with what Feng Shui calls rising qi, energy that moves not horizontally but vertically, like a career path, a growing reputation, or a surge of inspiration. In practical terms, Areca palms are one of the most home-friendly wealth plants you can choose. They are non-toxic, making them safe for households with pets or children. Their upkeep is minimal. They thrive in indirect sunlight and tolerate a mist watering or two. Unlike sharp-leafed species that cut energy or thorny varieties that block opportunity, the Areca palm's gentle curvature is inviting. It says, "This is a space of elegance. Enter clearly, leave uplifted." This energetic signature is essential in modern homes where mental noise often enters before physical guests do. Whether you're fielding business calls from your front hallway or coming home after a challenging day, this plant recalibrates your atmosphere without needing a word. Consider for a moment the case of Steve Jobs, not a Feng Shui practitioner in the traditional sense, but someone who intuitively understood space as an extension of thought. At his Palo Alto home, the entrance was always kept sparse, warm, and framed with organic elements. Visitors recalled the subtle presence of palms and natural textures not as ornamental touches, but as part of an intentional atmosphere. He believed in the power of less but deeper, an approach mirrored in the Feng Shui principle of space being a mirror of the mind. He once remarked that clutter was a form of mental pollution and that a clear physical path allowed for deeper thinking. The palms near his entrance weren't random. They were architectural accents to his energy field, smooth, intelligent, and aligned with the trajectory of innovation. Bringing that principle into your own life does not require minimalism or millions. It simply requires intention. Place your Areca palm where it can greet light, perhaps beside the gate or just beyond it, in the transitional space between outer and inner life. Avoid placing it in direct sunlight or wind corridors, which can dry its tips or scatter its leaves. A clay or wood pot grounds its energy, while a touch of red ribbon near the base activates the fire element more directly. When the wind moves through its fronds, you'll notice a subtle shift in air and mood. That's not imagination, that's qi realigning itself with movement. One of the most overlooked aspects of the Areca palm is its capacity to create psychological spaciousness. Many people live in tight emotional quarters, overbooked, overstimulated, and undersupported. A single Areca near your entryway can unconsciously signal expansion. Its vertical reach and spreading fronds become visual metaphors as for your next career step, the next idea worth pursuing, or the next level of clarity you didn't know was missing. The doorway into your home is also the doorway into your next chapter, and what filters it shapes the kind of energy that walks through and decides whether it will stay. The Areca palm doesn't ask for loud rituals or constant attention. It simply stands, sweeps, and uplifts. In that stillness lies its strength, and in your decision to place it with intention lies the invitation to a clearer, more prosperous path. Wealth plant number 3, freshwater mangrove. Deep roots, lasting wealth. In the quiet resilience of the freshwater mangrove lies one of nature's most overlooked metaphors for enduring wealth. Unlike flashy ornamental plants, the mangrove doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't bloom in vibrant bursts or climb toward the sky with dramatic flair. What it does, however, is survive, thrive even, in conditions where most others fail. This singular ability makes it one of the most potent but underestimated Feng Shui symbols for financial longevity, especially for those who have weathered storms in life or business. Mangroves are naturally wired for adversity. Their roots stretch far and deep, anchoring the plant into muddy, shifting, waterlogged terrain. This isn't merely a survival mechanism, it's a declaration. Even here I remain. In the language of Feng Shui, where every plant is a metaphor for how energy behaves, the freshwater mangrove symbolizes wealth that is not just gained, but kept. It speaks to the kind of fortune that persists through uncertainty, that grows quietly while chaos rages above the surface. Its roots mirror hidden reserves, emergency funds, family legacy, Foundational discipline. This is not fast money, it's stable money. It's not the stock that triples overnight, but the real estate that appreciates quietly over decades. It's not the salary bump from one lucky opportunity, but the long game of wealth built through foresight and patience. Energetically, this aligns beautifully with the metal element, which governs long-term structure, discipline, inheritance, and strategic wealth in Feng Shui. That's why the most beneficial placement for a freshwater mangrove, or its potted symbolic cousin, is near the west or northwest gate of your home. These directions correlate with planning, mentors, legacy, and the quiet forces that guide your decisions rather than your impulses. When you place the mangrove here, you're reinforcing your commitment to stability over spectacle. Now it must be said, the freshwater mangrove is not a plant for neglect. In the wild, its resilience comes from nature's equilibrium. But in a home or garden, its power only shines when it's respected. This means proper pruning to avoid overgrowth. It needs space, air, and water, but not excess. Stagnation in both roots and wealth begins when too much is hoarded and nothing flows. This is where the deeper symbolism kicks in. A mangrove that grows out of control becomes a tangled swamp. Similarly, money that is never circulated, never used for good, reinvested, or passed on, becomes energetically heavy. That's why traditional Feng Shui wisdom always balances the presence of long-term wealth plants with reminders of generosity and movement. To care for a mangrove is to care for your financial future. You must be mindful of its growth, respectful of its structure, and willing to adapt it when needed. Its quiet presence by your gate tells the universe, I'm ready not only to receive fortune, but to manage it. That difference, subtle as it is, marks the line between temporary success and legacy. And if you think the mangrove is too rare or unusual for such a role in your home, consider this. Throughout Southeast Asia, including in Vietnam and Thailand, mangroves have long been considered sacred ecosystems. Entire fishing villages owe their protection from storms and rising tides to the mangrove's vast root networks. In that same way, when placed with care, a single symbolic mangrove can serve as your home's guardian, not just physically, but financially. Its presence is grounding, its roots are reminders, and its symbolism echoes a truth many forget. Wealth that lasts isn't about how high you rise, but how deeply you're anchored. Whether you choose a small potted mangrove, a painting of one, or a symbolic carving placed near your metal-enhancing gate, let it be a mirror of your relationship with prosperity. Steady, hidden, strong. The kind of wealth that whispers, not shouts. That endures, not flashes. And that, when nurtured properly, becomes not just personal fortune, but a legacy worth leaving. Wealth plant number 4, rubber fig, Ficus elastica, the magnetic energy shield. In the nuanced world of Feng Shui, where form directs flow and subtle intention becomes energetic structure, the rubber fig, Ficus elastica, stands as a profound stabilizer. With its thick, dark green, waxy leaves, it is more than ornamental greenery. It acts like a living, energetic membrane, capturing what's excessive, holding what's valuable, and gently filtering what threatens your internal equilibrium. In homes where money comes and goes in unpredictable waves, or where emotional volatility constantly shifts the atmosphere, the rubber fig functions like an electromagnetic field made of roots and chlorophyll. It doesn't repel chaos loudly, it just doesn't let it stick. And in Feng Shui terms, this is a plant of profound anchoring. Because it is a plant of the earth element, its most powerful placement is near the northeast or southwest gates of your home. These compass sectors govern grounding, wisdom, spiritual integrity, and the emotional soil of relationships, whether with partners, mentors, or even yourself. If the energy at your threshold feels too thin, too rushed, or too uncertain, placing a healthy, lush rubber fig near the entrance creates what we might call a wealth buffer. It holds chi in the space without making it stagnant. It encourages retention, not just of money, but of harmony. While some plants shoot energy upward or outward, the rubber fig collects. Its rounded leaves echo the symbolism of ancient coins, broad, weighted, and non-angular. And energetically, it behaves much like how a financial advisor or long-term savings account would function. Protect, contain, and gradually accumulate. This subtle wealth cultivation is especially effective in homes where finances are tied to emotional labor, such as in caregiving professions, education, healing, or art. And for those whose careers are under constant public scrutiny or energetic exposure, this plant acts as a private shield. Consider the way Oprah Winfrey designs her home. Known for her immense generosity, clarity, and calm presence in high-pressure situations, Oprah often references the importance of grounded rituals and spatial harmony. In one architectural profile of her private estate, tall rubber fig plants are shown flanking the secluded entry to her garden sanctuary. These weren't random design choices. They served as silent guardians, not of celebrity, but of privacy, introspection, and energetic containment. Oprah, like many powerful figures, understands that protection isn't just about walls or fences. It's about managing how energy flows in and out, especially for those whose lives involve constant emotional giving. That's precisely what the rubber fig supports. It doesn't just grow, it holds. And it does so silently, without dramatic foliage or seasonal attention-grabbing blooms. For the modern home, especially one buzzing with technology, movement, or interpersonal tension, the presence of a rubber fig near the gate sends a quiet message to the universe. This space is sealed with intention. This is crucial in Feng Shui, because just as certain plants pull energy outward, signaling openness or active pursuit, others are needed to center and contain. Rubber fig is such a plant. It's for when you have already built momentum, and now you need to protect it. When placing this plant near your gate, ensure it is well maintained. Its leaves should be regularly wiped down, not just for aesthetics, but because the leaves are chi catchers. Dust can dull their capacity, their shine matters, their upright growth matters, and so does your respect for them. As with all wealth symbols in Feng Shui, intention and attention matter more than cost. One healthy rubber fig, tended weekly with presence, does more for your fortune than a dozen neglected decorative objects. You don't need to be a billionaire to cultivate wealth, but you do need to hold your energy like one. And in this, the rubber fig becomes your quiet teacher. Placed wisely, it shows you how to manage not only what you earn, but what you keep. How to soften volatility without losing ambition. How to remain still without becoming stagnant. How to welcome peace not as a luxury, but as a foundation. In a world constantly asking you to expand, sometimes your greatest wealth begins in knowing how to contain. And in that containment, the rubber fig stands, not as a loud talisman, but as a rooted whisper that says, you are safe to build. Wealth plant number 5, dwarf coconut tree, harmony between earning and spending. In the lexicon of Feng Shui and symbolic ecology, the dwarf coconut tree offers one of the most quietly profound representations of prosperity and equilibrium. Unlike its taller, more dramatic cousin, seen swaying in coastal winds, the dwarf coconut holds its power close to the ground, bringing richness not in height but in balance. It stands not as a flamboyant sign of success, but as a rooted dialogue between yin and yang, between earning and spending, ambition and satisfaction. Its very form invites reflection, a graceful trunk that curves rather than shoots, leaves that fan outward in generous arcs, and fruit that contains both sustenance and water. And so the dual symbols of wealth and wisdom. Placing this tree near the front gate of a home, especially in the east or southeast compass sectors aligned with the wood element, creates a subtle but consistent energetic signal. This household understands how to hold wealth, not just chase it. In classical Feng Shui, the southeast governs accumulated fortune, entrepreneurial drive, and the flow of stored energy. The coconut tree, with its water-filled core, directly aligns with this principle. It's not wealth for the sake of possession. It's the energetic memory of effort, wisely kept and humbly offered. It is a tree that nourishes through giving, but never depletes through excess. Its fruit sustains, its form shades, its water refreshes, and energetically, its very presence teaches a household how to create wealth with clarity and spend it with grace. This lesson is especially powerful in cultures where the coconut tree is not just a symbol, but a living member of the family ecology. In Polynesian and Southeast Asian traditions, coconut trees are often called life givers. They are planted to commemorate births, to bless new homes, and to anchor ancestral lines. Some families speak of trees passed down like heirlooms, not because of their fruit alone, but because of what they represented. Stability in shifting times, abundance even in lean seasons, and the ability to provide without loudness. This quiet energy is particularly useful for entrepreneurs, freelancers, and home-based business owners. While much of the modern wealth dialogue focuses on ambition, hustle, and scalability, the dwarf coconut tree embodies the quieter side of financial intelligence, the knowing of when to pause, when to harvest, and when to reinvest in stillness. Its broad canopy provides metaphorical shelter from impulsive decision-making. Its deep roots whisper of decisions made not from scarcity, but from vision. And this is where the placement matters. At your gate, the dwarf coconut does not overwhelm. It does not demand attention or crowd the path. Instead, it welcomes energy that is balanced, not too fast, not too slow, not greedy, but intentional, not empty, but refreshingly full. It subtly filters the opportunities that arrive, keeping the ones that are rooted in reciprocity. Because in Feng Shui, the gate is not just an entrance, it is a frequency receiver, and the tree you place there becomes a kind of antenna, broadcasting how you relate to fortune, how you treat your energy, and whether or not your wealth is allowed to stay. A well-tended dwarf coconut is a message that you are not merely lucky, you are balanced. And in modern homes where spending can often be disconnected from meaning, where digital payments flow faster than breath, this tree anchors something real. You touch its trunk as you pass. You watch the way its fronds move with the wind, but do not break. You learn slowly and without instruction how to hold joy in one hand and generosity in the other. In spiritual terms, the coconut tree doesn't just symbolize prosperity. It gives you a framework to live it. Grow with patience, store what nourishes, share what overflows. And most of all, never forget that real wealth is not what enters fast, but what remains long after the rush. In this way, the dwarf coconut tree becomes more than a plant. It becomes a practice, a living guide at the threshold of your home, one that teaches not just how to succeed, but how to stay whole while doing it. And perhaps that is the most powerful kind of fortune of all. Integrating Feng Shui directionality, when planting means something more. In the language of Feng Shui, placement isn't a casual afterthought. It's the silent architect of impact. A plant, no matter how vibrant or beautiful, can only amplify energy when it stands in alignment with the directional chi it was born to complement. This is where many modern households make mistakes, placing decorative greenery purely for aesthetics, not realizing they're creating an energetic mismatch, sometimes even unintentionally obstructing the very luck they hope to invite. When viewed through the five-element lens, each compass direction speaks its own energetic dialect, and each plant is fluent in a specific one. Understanding this language is what transforms your gate from a threshold into a transmitter of prosperity. Start with the east and southeast. Governed by the wood element, these directions are deeply linked to growth, new beginnings, family harmony, and the accumulation of wealth through effort and momentum. Plants that express upward motion, strong stalks, and vibrant green tones thrive here, not just biologically, but energetically. Ornamental bamboo, with its vertical rhythm and symbolic endurance, is perfect here. The Areca palm, with its sweeping fan-like leaves and purifying presence, also syncs well, bringing clarity and elevation. The dwarf coconut tree, rich in water symbolism but rooted in wood's giving nature, provides an energetic gesture of generosity and balance. Together, these plants harmonize with the directional energy, acting as natural amplifiers of fortune and forward movement. Shift to the south, the domain of the fire element, where reputation, vision, and personal expression burn bright. Here, light-loving plants with spreading leaves and bright color undertones, like the Areca palm, resonate most. The fire direction is not about accumulation, it's about radiance. And Areca here doesn't just invite prosperity, it invites recognition, charisma, and influence. Its upward curve mirrors the energy of the sun, pulling attention and respect into the home like light through an open lens. To the west and northwest, we enter the metal realm, zones of precision, legacy, and structured abundance. These are not the areas for wild, sprawling growth. Instead, they call for symbolism rooted in longevity and discipline. The freshwater mangrove stands firm here. Its adaptability, ability to root in uncertainty, and water resilience embody the metal principle of enduring through contrast. When placed at gates facing these directions, mangroves act as energetic custodians of long-term wealth, quietly influencing how financial systems, inheritance, and strategic investments flow into your life. But beware, too many metal-aligned plants can dry out the space. What matters is not how many pots line your fence, but whether their essence complements your compass. The northeast and southwest belong to the earth element. They speak of foundation, reflection, and emotional anchoring. Here, the rubber fig finds its energetic home. With its thick, glossy leaves and deep absorption capacity, it stabilizes energy. It collects, it contains, and in doing so, it supports clarity in relationships, trust in business, and the ability to ground creative ideas into actual steps. These gates benefit not from flashy growth, but from steady presence. A single rubber fig at your southwest gate will hold more energetic value than an entire garden of misplaced blooms. It signals that this is a home where stability is prioritized over speed, and wealth knows how to stay, not just how to arrive. This is where quantity fails and quality triumphs. You could line your gate with a dozen impressive potted plants, but if they're energetically out of sync with the gate's element, you're not amplifying, you're contradicting. Like placing a grand piano in the middle of a yoga room, it doesn't matter how beautiful the instrument is, it doesn't belong there. Instead, one well-placed plant that speaks the language of the direction will do more than a forest of mismatches. And the best part? This alignment isn't only for fortune. It creates a harmony that visitors feel before they knock, a calm that your family absorbs unconsciously each day. It invites flow, it reduces resistance, it allows energy to enter and settle, like water pooling naturally in the shape of the land. When you place a coconut tree in the east, you are anchoring generosity in your family's future. When you plant a mangrove in the northwest, you are inviting strategic longevity and wise decisions. When a rubber fig guards the southwest, you are protecting the emotional core of your household. Feng Shui, at its most practical, is not about belief, it's about observation. If a plant thrives in the right direction, your life tends to feel lighter, more supported, less obstructed. If it wilts, or if your gate feels crowded, heavy, or off, there is likely a mismatch not in aesthetics, but in elemental rhythm. So consider your entrance not just as a passage, but as a declaration. Each direction is a different kind of welcome. Each plant is a different kind of intention. Together they compose the energetic preface to your home story, and in that story your gate becomes a sentence. Make sure it speaks the language your future understands. Because energy, like wealth, is not just about arrival, it's about alignment. And alignment, more than abundance, is the truest fortune of all. Closing reflection. Your gate is a mirror of your intention. A gate is never just metal or wood. It is the first breath your home takes in the morning and the last exhale it offers to the night. It greets your mail carrier and your mother. It receives laughter and sometimes sorrow. But more than anything, it holds a conversation with the unseen, the movement of energy, the silent frequency of prosperity that passes by each day, asking quietly, is this the place where I should stop and stay? Look again at your entrance. Is it clear or is it tired? Does it extend a welcome or does it turn inward, unsure of itself? Feng Shui teaches us that fortune hesitates when the message is unclear. And sometimes that message isn't written in stone, but in the wilting leaves of a forgotten pot, or the absence of life where vibrancy was meant to bloom. The plants we place at our threshold are not just decorative touches. They are energetic translators. A palm may sweep away stale patterns. A rubber fig may hold firm to your vision. A dwarf coconut tree may offer quiet balance between what you give and what you keep. And a single stalk of bamboo, rooted and rising, may be all your dreams need to remember how to grow again. You don't need to wait for a perfect season or a perfect budget. You only need to ask yourself one clear question. If fortune came to my door today, would it feel welcomed or would it pause, unsure of where to land? In that question lies your power, not to force luck, but to ready the space where it can recognize itself. A gate aligned with intention does not beg for abundance. It harmonizes with it. It attracts not through noise, but through quiet readiness. So today, walk to your gate, brush away the dust, water the soil, let your hands say to the universe, I am ready to receive, and I know the language of alignment. And from there, just watch. Because energy, like a bird in search of branch, knows where it is safe to land. If this episode inspired you to reimagine your threshold, not as a barrier, but as a bridge, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Which plant are you most drawn to plant at your gate? Your reflection may become the spark someone else needs to redesign their own welcome. And if this perspective shifted something inside you, I gently ask for your support. Like this video, share it with someone you love, and subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. We're on a journey to reach 2,000 followers, and with your help, we'll grow this community one aligned home, one inspired gesture, and one living intention at a time. Thank you for allowing me to walk beside you today. Let's continue to make space for fortune, not just in our homes, but in the way we open our lives.